The 2024 European Audio Engineering Society Convention in Madrid was a landmark event that brought together some of the most prominent figures in audio engineering. Sonimus' longtime collaborator and esteemed speaker Ezequiel Morfi delivered an insightful talk about mastering in which he showcased SonEQ as a perfect tool for stereo audio mastering in the box. Ezequiel Morfi is a renowned producer and sound engineer. He runs TITANIO Studios, self-built studios in Buenos Aires, Argentina. With a bachelor degree in music composition and music technology, Ezequiel boasts over 2,000 commercial releases collaborating with prominent Latin American artists like Alberto Spinetta and Charly García. As a member of the Audio Engineering Society, he has held significant positions, including the chair of the Student Delegate Assembly and vice chair of the Education Committee. Ezequiel is also a respected teacher and keynote speaker presenting worldwide. We wanted to take the opportunity to talk with him about his career, music, technology, and his collaboration with Sonimus. Thank you so much, Ezequiel, for being with us today.
Thank you.
I wanted to start talking about your career and your work in general at TITANIO Studios.
Yeah.
Tell us about your career, how you became a sound engineer and producer.
I've always been into music, and my dad is a lawyer, but he used to not build equipment, but kind of, sell. In those times you had to have the amplifier and the cassette deck and the turntable and the speakers to match everything. So I used to do that. And so I was a kid. When I was a kid growing up, we had all those pieces of home recording gear at home. He didn't play any instrument or do any recording at all, but he did teach me how to record to a cassette for my Walkman off the FM radio. So I used to do that, and I loved it, and it blended well with my passion for music. We always had music playing back at home or in the car. So it was kind of natural that I would grow a love for music afterwards and start playing instruments and start playing in bands. But at the same time, and with the computer at home, being always interested in how to do things with music, with the computer and with software and such, and with CDs, recording CDs, burning CDs and the like, kind of my generation go-to things. And that's where it started.
Right. And what inspired you to build your studio in Buenos Aires?
Well, as most of us do, you get to work at your home studio first. I was still living with my parents because I was very young when I got into the industry. And I was going to college as well. So we had friends, and we had our students. I mean, the people going to college with me to study composition and to study music, saying, "But you're a sound guy too, so can I go to your place? Would you mix my track? You probably know better how to do it than I do." So I started getting jobs to do at my home studio, and at the same time, getting a nice computer or getting a cool sound card and learning how to use the stuff properly, the software that was available at the time. So it all ended up as a bedroom studio like everybody else's. And there was a time when this kind of hit the fan, because it was still my parents' house, because I was kind of young. So clients and friends kept coming in, but by the end of the session, I had to ask them to lower their voices because my parents were sleeping, or maybe not smoke or drink, because it was my parents' house and anything. So it became kind of obvious that moving somewhere else might be beneficial if I wanted to do this seriously. And I was already working at a studio at the time, but we only did mastering. So it was kind of meant to be that we had to have a special place to do recording and mixing as well. And from then and there, it took off, really.
What current projects are you working on right now at TITANIO Studios?
Well, lots of, thankfully. We've been recording a lot lately. We've been recording for a funk band, like to play together. So we had a recording session right before I took the plane to Madrid. They're called Funkelitos, and there were like 8 people playing simultaneously at the studio. And I have to go back to that record now when I'm back. And we've just finished a couple of tracks that I produce. I'm particularly proud of one of them, which is by an artist from Ecuador called Damian Grease. And we work this with session players, which are, of course, friends of mine across, Ecuador and Argentina. So a drummer, I mean, we produced the track online, virtually, so to speak. And then we had a drummer play in Buenos Aires, but had the guitars recorded in Ecuador. And then the singer tracked his vocals. But before that, we had to have the keyboards done in Buenos Aires. And then I mixed it and mastered it. And now it's going to be out next week. So it's like a fun project.
Yeah.
It's a different way of working as opposed to the regular way of working, which is getting to the rehearsal room for a couple of months with a band or with an artist and, arrange and play and rework his or her original piece, which we also do all the time. And it's fun and it will continue to be fun. No one's going to get bored out of it. But this cool projects, and they're super interesting because you never know how it's going to turn out and what's the next step. And to do the executive production of it all is also fun.
We've just been at the European AES conference here in Madrid. We had a lot of fun together. I think it was a really good conference.
It was.
But my first question is, what did you like best about the whole conference? What was perhaps the topic or the talk that really hit you the most?
I'm not going to give the wrong answer, but I'm going to give maybe the less politically correct answer, which is but in true honesty, what I like the most is the social aspect of it. And then it's always been that way when it comes down to AES events. I mean, you could say that, I don't know, the Janelec room with the immersive sound system installed was amazing and mind-blowing and a pleasure to be in, and that would be true. Or you could say that the student recording competition was really fun, and the works that we've listened to were top-notch, and that would also be true. And I enjoy those two events, just to name a few, just to name those two. And I enjoy them very much. But I mean, meeting up with all friends and colleagues from around the world, getting to know new people, getting into super interesting talks with fellow colleagues from the audio world who work somewhere else completely different than Buenos Aires. It's so mind-blowing that it's still, to me, the most fun the most fun aspect of it. Yeah.
Right.
And I recommend it to everybody. And you know what? It's not anything that you can replace by any means. You could watch a shooting of those talks, of those seminars. Of course, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be able to ask a question or be there at the time, but still, you would kind of, watch the presentation. But you can't replace sitting in a table with 10 or 15 or 12 fellow engineers that you know and are your friends, or that you don't know at all and you just met, and everybody has traveled a long distance to get here, and they all have their experiences, and they're all having a laugh, and they're all having a cup of coffee or a beer or anything, and it's super fun. And you may end up being there for hours, and it's really exciting. How can you replace that? I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should come the next time.
You did a talk about mastering during the conference.
It's true.
Your talk was about mastering and kind of debunking the myths behind it. Is that correct? So I guess my first question is, What do you consider the main objectives of stereo music mastering today?
Well, it's interesting because there's so much talk, and there's always been so much talk about mastering that it's not like we don't know what it is, but there are so many potential definitions around that wouldn't be wrong. That I mean, I tried to settle down and put it down in a sentence during my seminar. Not meaning that that was the utter unquestionable truth, but to bring it down to a simple concept for once, just to share a few thoughts. And of course, to make it interesting, we talked about strengthening the emotional impact, going beyond the technical, at least as a first step, and going back to thinking about the music and how to make it sound the way it should sound. And I'm especially avoiding words now like make it sound better, or make it sound good, or make it sound louder, or make it sound compatible. All those things also have to be truth, but I mean, because somebody sat down and made use of their main tool as an engineer, which is your sensitivity. The fact that you can, you know, cling on to emotionally to what's happening, understand the music. And of course, in order to do that, you have to listen to a lot of music and get emotionally engaged to it, which should be easy because we're into this because we like music. Otherwise, what are we doing here? So that was the main focus at first at the presentation. Then I went on talking about technical stuff because it's an AS convention. Now I like technical stuff as well, but the first thing to say about, especially considering how mastering makes tracks sound so much differently nowadays, is to remember that the goal should be to strengthen the emotional impact,
So you mentioned that
whatever that means.
you work or you started working. One of your first jobs was working in a mastering
Yeah.
facility or mastering studio. Are these concepts something that you bring with you from those times?
Well, it's hard to tell. I don't even think I came up with that phrase myself, but not that it's too important anyway. But there's also not a chance, not a moment that I can remember that somebody said that to me or that I read it in a book. I think I might have stolen it from the French composer's Pierre Boulez's book on composition. Maybe I'm stealing it from there, and I'm not sure, and he doesn't know because he's dead. But but yeah, I mean, what you could say is that, like, possibly you and everybody else, I've also felt myself kind of trapped or maybe blind in terms of a goal when I sat down to master a song. And even after all the training that I went through, because my first job was at a big mastering studio in Buenos Aires, so I had someone to look up to, which I still look up to, and to teach me that stuff. I didn't have to figure it out myself. But even so, how many times did I sit down to do a track, maybe thinking too much about making it loud or louder or more competitive, or hit the spot for the standard norm or whatever? Because it's easy to lose yourself in the details, in the technical details. And of course, in those times, I'm talking about 20 years ago, we did have much more pressure, mastering engineers, to make it sound loud or to, make a CD sound good and make it sound good on every piece of equipment that was available at the time, which could be from primitive cell phones or the iPod that have just come out, to a Discman, to the car. So I mean, we have lots of things to care for, and that helped boycott the primary vision, conspire against the main vision, which should always be make it sound as beautiful as possible. So strengthening the emotional impact is the cheesiest thing I could think of. And I just keep repeating it, and people seem to like it. I don't know.
During your talk, you mentioned quality control.
Yeah.
So, what does quality control means in the context of mastering, and why do you think it's important?
Well, because it's not important, it's vital. If you can't provide your client with that, you're missing half of the job. And not the second important half. A half that's as important as the sensitive part. Because now that you've connected to the music and that you've managed to use your knowledge to twist those knobs on compressors and EQs to get something that sounds even more powerful and compelling, how are you going to present it to the world? How is your files that you're going to handle to your client, how are they going to go through all the different platforms and the different formats that we have nowadays? Now, if it sounds good only in the control room, but not everywhere else, then it's flawed and you've failed. Just like if you had put too much attention on making it perfect for Spotify and vinyl and not make it sound more musical, if you could in any ways. So it's really as important as what you do with your ears, the quality control. It's purely technical. You don't even have to turn your speakers on to do it. But there's a lot to know and a lot to do about it.
How would you describe a typical modern processing chain for mastering? I know there's a lot of talks, a lot of videos about it, and you mentioned some of them in the talk. So I guess my question is more your view and perspective about the chain, and specifically, how would you go for it? Or do you have your go-to chain?
I think everybody should have their go-to chain. I know that sounds kind of trivial, like I don't think about my chain and I just go to that chain and I don't care. But that's not the case. The case is to avoid and to prevent yourself from trying new stuff each and every time. I mean, experimenting is always good, but the first thing that I could offer, that any mastering engineer can offer their clients, is the fact that you know your room, you know your speakers, and you know your gear. Doesn't matter if analog, digital, hardware, or software. If I'm going to try something new, maybe on the weekends during my free time. I mean, you wouldn't put a new football player that you don't know at the final match of the World Championship, right?
Right.
Could be right, but could also be wrong. So you're not going to risk it. So yeah, my chain is always there. It's flexible. So if I'm going to use 5 or 6 processors, then the go-to chain or the standard chain has 8. They're not always on all of them. So if I use this compressor, maybe I don't use this one for this project in particular. But the chain, contains both, and they're all in bypass at first, and then you turn on the one that you're going to need. We have quite some equipment, analog and digital hardware equipment at TITANIO Studios, both in Buenos Aires and in Mexico, and yet I wouldn't think about doing mastering for music with outdoor gear anymore, at all, and for various reasons. So it's entirely digital now.
My following question was gonna be analog or digital.
Digital all the way, definitely. definitely. It sounds so much better, much less risks, and I wouldn't consider. I mean, you could, and it would still sound good. It's not a problem, but there wouldn't be any benefit of it if you choose the right plugins, which is, of course, not easy to do because everybody seems to do the same thing, which is think in terms of analog gear as the most expensive analog gear that you could buy, time proven, and compare that to some of the brands of plugins that have the most marketed place and presence, and they're not necessarily the best sounding ones. So I always thought that that was like an unfair comparison, you know? So, well, yeah.
I guess my next question, this wasn't on the script, but I think it's interesting to know. AI, yes, no, for some projects. I use it just for as an assistant. How are you engaging or not engaging AI on your mastering work and in your studio work?
I don't know the first thing about AI, really. I think just to make it clear, our computers at the studio, not the one that we use at the office, but the one that are in the control room, our offline computers have always been and will always be offline. They're still running Windows 7, and they work every day. I haven't formatted my computers for longer than 10 years, and I'm only going to do that by the time the hard drive breaks, and I have no choice to do so. And yet, and thanks to a bunch of cool companies like Sonimus being one of them, who still provide support and installers that work for Windows 7, I can cope. I can bear to do this without missing out on the latest plugins, at least the ones that I care for. So I'm super happy about that. You should be jealous.
You seem to have a long relationship with Sonimus, with our product. How did your involvement with Sonimus started?
We've been working together, if that's the right term. Well, yeah, I mean, we're beta testers and have been for long ago. For longer than 10 years now. I think my first plugin by Sonimus was, of course, the SonEQ free. I used to teach a lot. Well, I still do, but at the time I was doing a number of classes and courses and stuff, and my goal was always to present the subjects and the themes and do the practical work using only freeware plugins, because it was always too easy to do that on cracked plugins or the plugins that I had. But then, what is the person going to use when he or she gets back home? So I always thought doing this with good freeware plugins was cool, because it helps spread the word. And by researching and searching, through the web, I came across Sonimus. We'd only had just a few plugins at the time, and SonEQ Free was one of them, and the only one that was free. So I became a very big user, and I probably must have sent them an email or something, because I always like to reach out for a cool developer. The Gearspace, the now called Gearspace forum was available at the time. Not much else, like there was no social media. And from what I remember, I got in touch with them and I invited them to one of my presentations for the AES talking about mastering with plugins. And that's how I got to know the brand and the people behind it. And well, soon enough, they were doing something else. I mean, a new plugin, and they asked me if I would be interested in trying it out before it came out, which is such a compliment, you know, and such a cool spot to put your finger on when you're an engineer and you like stuff and somebody is asking your opinion about it and what would you change about it. Come on, I mean, so many things that I could think of, so many cool things that I like to say, this is cool, this is great. And so that's how it began, and it hasn't stopped, and we've beta tested and tried out, I don't know, 10 plugins now. Different kinds of ones that I like most, ones that I don't use as often, but my fellow colleagues in the studio find useful for their tasks. So that's cool. That's really awesome.
Awesome. And which Sonimus plugin do you use the most in your production, mixes, or mastering?
I have to mention SonEQ again. Now that has evolved from the free version onto the pro version onto the SonEQ 2 version, which I think really breaks the mold. It's always sound terrific. It's always sound amazing, right on the spot. There are times when I do feel like, you know, it's not fighting, but getting my way around a plugin for a couple of moments until I get it sounding right. Like I want to mess up a little bit with the configuration of a plugin to get a cool sound out of it. And there are times when I really want the result right on the spot, and that's the case for SonEQ always, especially for mixing too, for mixing as well. And the low shelf and the high shelf band are incredible. So I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's simple, yet it's quite open. I mean, the possibilities that you can have, it's flexible. And the 2 version with the modular capacities and the fact that you can like remove a module or bypass it hits the spot, because I could have as many or as few bands as I want. So I'm super happy about that. I guess it's easy to say it's my favorite plugin. And when they launched the AEQ, the API based EQ under the same structure, I enjoyed it as much in terms of the modular part, but I still think the sound of the SonEQ, which is kind of custom from Sonimus, is amazing. And I also like everybody else, I like using something that it's my kind of secret weapon. It's not a secret weapon,
No.
but we all enjoyed using a certain plugin that we're aware of it's not as popular, and you kind of take pride. You take pride of it, and I'm thinking about the sweet tone filter, which is really old, which doesn't mean it sounds bad. It doesn't sound bad at all. It still hasn't been upgraded. I think it will be soon, but today I still have to, bring up on screen these old GUI from 15 years ago. But the way it sounds and the fact that it's again an original design by Sonimus is great. And I'm a big user of tilt filters, so the more I have, to a certain extent, the more fun, and the high cut and low cut filters are cool too. So I'm kind of happy that I have this plugin that it's not as well known. I hope now it is, and that it sounds awesome, and that it's super simple.
Cool. And could you describe how Sonimus plugins have influenced your workflow, if in any way? I mean, you mentioned already Sonic Q2 with the modularity. Is there any other plugin that has done that kind of effect on you, or that has affected the way you process your audio in a way?
Yeah, I like to. It's not like I like complex things, but in terms of a workflow, I do want to be picky and specific. If you don't want to be, Sonimus offers a number of plugins which are channel strips and stuff. That's super cool, and I always mention that or show them around to clients. But in my own and they might be fit for them, but in my own personal terms and the way I like using stuff at the studio, I like to go the other way around and specifically put something that I want exactly where I want it. And the fact that Sonimus is so dedicated to doing saturation and distortion units, well, not distortion, saturation, and EQs and compressors, really makes it easier for me. So my mixing template, I mean, to think about a bigger scenario than just a mastering chain, will have an EQ and a compressor, and the fact that I can choose between 3 or 4 EQs that Sonimus can provide me with, and a number of compressors as well, makes it more flexible. So I tend to have, I don't want to say this and sound bad in terms of being prejudicial and thinking drums are SonEQ and SSL 4K, because they don't have to be. But the template for mixing drums goes that way. So I have to think twice to change it. When it comes for vocals, in terms of my template for vocals, I'd rather have the EQ from the Burnley and have the Tuco compressor and not the SSL based. So the fact that I can have so many cool and flexible and good sounding EQs and compressors, but at the same time be able to pick this one or this other one, this task or this other task is it's really cool, and that's how it's influenced our workflow in TITANIO.
Do you have a favorite Sonimus plugin?
Yes, and you know the answer. It's SonEQ too,
Amazing.
definitely.
Thank you.
But my colleagues disagree. I mean, not disagree. There's 5 of us working at TITANIO, and I think they pretty much all have a different one. So that speaks good things of Sonimus, really.
Amazing. What advice would you give young sound engineers and producers starting their careers?
I'm a big nerd. I don't think people study too much nowadays and rely too much on simple things that you could see on Instagram or on YouTube. I don't know how many times I've read the plugins manuals just to get around how they work and what they do and what they sound the way they do, and even go beyond that with a couple of tools like, I don't know, a spectrum analyzer to measure the distortion that I mean that the plugin produces, or to actually see the EQ curves and get to know them better. And I'm not engineer in terms of electronic engineers by any means. You don't have to be a mathematician to do that, and it really helps you understand. And it doesn't break the fact that you can then sit down and mix a song using your heart and your ears. I'm concerned that younger generations are not going through the effort of studying so hard and rely too much on presets and formulas. And I understand that, because that's what's selling in today's world. It's good to have more options, and I sometimes need to take the quick way in some terms, but it really helps that you know what you're doing and you can, craft your craft. Is that an expression?
Yeah.
So I definitely suggest that you should study harder. I mean, how many coffees have I had up until late at night, reading and taking notes from manuals and not understanding a concept and going to look for it. And I still do, like every weekend, you know? So yeah, and it's fun. It's also fun.
How do you see the future of music production and mastering in the upcoming years?
I hope it doesn't change much. There's no reason for it to change. It's really fun and inspiring as it is. It's making I mean, the tool, I mean, we're overwhelmed by technology the way I see it. The good thing about it is that mastering will be less and less of a dark art. And we're struggling for that by doing blog interviews like this, or writing an article about it, or doing a presentation in Madrid or in the moon, for what it's worth. Doesn't matter. So I guess that the more information we have and the more tools that are appropriate we have, it will be less of an unexplored and mysterious concept. I hope it doesn't lose it its its importance, though. I am a little bit concerned when I see mastering solutions out of a web-based service that's AI fueled. You know what I mean? Because kind of makes it a little bit less worthy. And as a solution, it's not really a solution. You know? So yeah, I mean, there's good things for us in the future, I guess, and some things to watch for. That's all.
Is there any emerging trend or technology that you are particularly excited about?
Luckily, no. There's a lot of things going on. We just saw this at the AES show, so I'm really happy that there's a lot of stuff coming. I don't want to be get left out of it, and but I'm so passionate about stereo work that it. I mean, it's really interesting that we get to do every day what we do, and that there are more options, and that technology is going forwards in that direction. I think what I like the most about technology nowadays is that it can get you to work on projects beyond your geographical boundaries so much more easily, you know. But I wouldn't be the best person to ask about what the future of audio is, because I'm really too focused on what I do and what we do at the studio every day. And well, it's always fascinating to see some new cool stuff like we just saw in Madrid. But I'll let other people handle that.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Ezequiel. It's been great having you here with us with Sonimus. I hope you guys enjoy the show, or at least this interview, and we will continue collaborating. And looking forward to see what's the future coming
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, thank you. Let's stay in touch. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Ezequiel.
Thank you.